Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's daily devotional for September the 10th. There's an article that I wanted to bring up. It's a little bit different today. It comes from a website called the Babylon Bee, and for if some of you are familiar with the Babylon Bee, it's kind of a satire website. And it kind of describes itself as a Christian website, has religious themes, that sort of thing. But it kind of focuses on publishing articles that are satire, irony type stuff. And normally I wouldn't able one of these articles for a daily devotional. However, there is one, actually there's two total, but we'll do that other one later at some other time. But there's one article that I wanted to bring up because I thought the point of it was very interesting. So the title of this article is "Handy New Button Lets You Notify Someone's Pastor About Their Facebook Post." And there's a picture of two guys drinking alcohol with the little "Summon Pastor" button. Obviously, it's not real, but this is the article. By popular demand, a new feature is being added to Facebook, a button that lets you summon someone's pastor to their recent questionable Facebook post. The button is useful for when you see fellow church members posting theologically questionable quotes, sharing a Joel Osteen video clip, or putting up a picture of themselves having alcoholic beverages. Clicking the button will immediately send the poster's pastor a notification so they can provide theological correction, admonition, or church discipline. Look, we already know everything about you, including where you live, what you're thinking, and who your pastor is, so we're just putting that information to work with a helpful, handy new button, said Mark Zuckerberg. You can now instantly tip off someone's pastor to their rank sin or heresy. Christian Facebook users immediately took advantage of the feature, reporting fellow church members for crimes such as dancing, drinking, and posting on Facebook before reading their Bible. Pastors say they really appreciate all the snitching and didn't have anything better to do than police everyone's behavior anyway. The button is, of course, religiously neutral. For Jewish Facebook users, it will summon their rabbi, while Mormon Facebook users will find themselves confronted by their church's 18-year-old elders. You can click the button on an atheist user's post, but nothing will happen. So obviously it's supposed to be a satirical, funny, ironic type of article. But what's interesting to me is the point that the article is kind of edging around is that a lot of times Christians tend to, I say Christian, well, it includes real Christians as well, but religious people or people who consider themselves Christian, they have one standard for how they live, one standard how they talk to one another personally one-on-one with people, or how they act or conduct themselves. But then there's a different standard sometimes when it comes to what we're going to call our spiritual digital footprint. The things that we share or post online and that sort of thing. And I think it's interesting because this is actually the reason, or one of the primary reasons I kind of, for the most part, years and years ago, got off of social media. As a preacher, seeing a lot of the things that members who were part of the Church of Christ, not necessarily members at the congregation I was preaching at the time or anything like that, but just members of the Church of Christ, the things that they would post that either would lend itself to a questionable judgment in terms of what they were posting, or the type of pictures they were posting, whether they were pictures of them dressed immodestly, or things that they were involved in or doing secularly that were, if not sinful, then debatable. And it was kind of it just was a very, very difficult situation for me as a preacher and as a Christian. And so for the most part, I don't post a lot on Facebook, and obviously YouTube is just for religious, or I say religious, for our spiritual videos and so forth. And then but it's kind of funny because this is the article kind of hit home for me anyway about kind of the digital spiritual footprint that sometimes that real Christians leave on social media, and this is a topic that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, about the type of example that we're supposed to be, not just in the flesh, one-on-one with people, or how we conduct ourselves, but also online. And this applies to a lot of different areas, including the type of posts that we leave, the type of comments we make to others, people who leave comments on articles. There are individuals who, because of the general anonymity that is provided online, people will say things and refer to things and say things in a sort of way that under normal circumstances, if their identity was known or if they were one-on-one with a person, would never ever say. And it's important that we keep in mind the type of example that we're setting, not only obviously with our coworkers or classmates, with our family and that sort of thing, but also for the larger example we set, again, digitally, to other Christians, as well as to people who may see something we post and are able to trace us back to our Facebook page and see, hey, this person's supposed to be a member of the Church of Christ, or this person's supposed to be religious, and this is how they talk about things. One example that I wanted to bring up is Paul talking to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 3, and in verse 10, Paul says, and it's the broader context is talking about persecution, certainly, but Paul says, "You have carefully followed my doctrine, my manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance." And then he talks about the persecutions. Paul uses himself on numerous occasions, not just with Timothy, but with others as well, as an example to emulate. In fact, the Philippians, he says, "You note those who so walk as you have us for an example." This should be in every aspect of an individual's life, that in order to have an example that is worthy of emulation, one, by their teaching, by the way that they live their life, their purpose, their determination, their consistency, and perhaps that might be one of the I guess, theme points, I guess, regarding this idea, is that being consistent across the board, not just in the flesh, one-on-one with people, but also in our day and time digitally. On Facebook, on Instagram, the pictures that we post, the things that we say, and certainly in a lot of ways, I mean, it was somewhat depressing for me because, again, this was years ago, but there were individuals that I knew that claimed to be members of the Church of Christ that would post things with themselves involved in things or dressed a certain way that simply that I didn't agree with. And it kind of shows in some ways, and again, we could talk about whether or not social media is a good or a bad thing. Obviously, it depends on how you use it. But in a lot of ways, it opens up a window into the true character and true conduct of individuals who claim to serve God, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And on the one hand, I guess I would rather know about it and maybe hope to help that individual than not. But to a certain extent, it was just very depressing to see individuals that I, in some cases, had known for a long time, see the type of life that they at least presented to others that they lived on social media. And obviously the type of posts or the type of words that are used, the type of jokes that are shared, that sort of thing, all also speak to a person's character or a person's how a person thinks on an everyday level, not just when they're at worship service on Sunday or Wednesday night, but over the course of their workday or the course of everyday life. And ultimately, being consistent as a Christian demands that we take into account the example that we're setting. That we're not, first of all, that we're not setting an example of one who says one thing but then lives a different way, or who claims to believe in something but then doesn't practice what we preach. And certainly that we not set an example that is going to cause discouragement for other brethren. And so all of that has to be taken into account when we are involved in social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that sort of thing. That we be aware of ourselves, that we be aware of the example we're setting, and understand that obviously, whether, again, they use the term pastor in the sense of a person's preacher. Obviously, a pastor is an elder, and there's always has to be more than one in a local congregation. But if this is not something that I would be comfortable with my brethren seeing, then or saying this where my brethren, my preacher, my elders can see it, then you have to really ask yourself, should I be involved with this at all? Should I be posting this at all? And it should really cause us or give us reason to pause. There are things sometimes on articles on different websites where there's a comment section, and sometimes people will troll. Those what's called trolling. They'll post something that is mean or contrary, like sometimes on the Gamecock, South Carolina Gamecock websites that I follow. Those of you who know me know I'm a huge South Carolina Gamecock fan. College football, college basketball, that sort of thing. And sometimes, especially Clemson fans, will troll South Carolina websites and talk about how terrible South Carolina is and so forth. But sometimes the language that is used is such that it makes you wonder, if this individual claims to be religious or not, and that sort of thing. You would hope a religious person wouldn't be involved in things like that. But again, the idea of the anonymity, the general sense of kind of wearing a mask online, it's almost as if you can live a life that is not your own on social media to a certain extent, almost like you can pretend or allow that part of you to come out in online and on social media, and it can discourage people. Certainly, there's online bullying and that sort of thing that we shouldn't be involved in. But it just goes to show that in addition to our words and our actions as being a part of our conduct, that we have to remember and have to imagine at judgment, what if all of the stuff that we've posted online, all of the activities, all of the jokes we've shared and so forth, what if all of that is brought up at judgment as well? A lot of times we talk about our conduct with regard to our words and our actions and our thoughts, for sure. But what about the general anonymity type of things that maybe we think that nobody notices or no Christians are going to see or something like that? What type of impact might that have at judgment as well? So anyway, I just thought that was an interesting, like I said, it's a satire. Again, the Babylon Bee is a kind of a Christian satire website, but there's certain things that they bring up. I kind of went through the other day and just looked at some of the articles. There's certain things that they mention and that they bring up, ironically, to kind of make a point about the way sometimes people who claim to be Christians, how they think and how they live. And I kind of, like I said, that the social media one is one that kind of hit home for me. And certainly, as I said, kind of referring to it as our spiritual digital footprint, or our digital spiritual footprint, however you want to say it, the example we set online, we have to be aware of and be thoughtful of because that's part of our conduct. All right, everybody, that's the daily devotional for you today. I hope that's something that's beneficial for us to think about, especially in our day and age where social media, again, whether you like it or not, it is here. And it's obviously it's good or badness is graded in how it's used and the motivation and mentality of the individuals who use it. It's technology, like right now we're reaching out and discussing these things on social media, on YouTube, on Facebook. So certainly it can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. It can be used to set a good example and to spread the truth of God's word, or it can be used to set a bad example and show forth an individual as being a hypocrite. And so we have to be aware of ourselves. Remember, tomorrow we'll have another daily devotional. Tomorrow's Friday, so we'll have our daily devotional at 6:30. Lord willing, I will see you all tomorrow afternoon. Thanks, everyone.